Hi guys, if you're watching this video, you probably want to know how do you set up a book signing or a book event, and then once you have it set up, what exactly do you do after that? I'm excited to tell you a few tips and tricks from what I've learned in my personal experiences from doing book signings at Barnes & Noble. I've done a couple signings there. I've done book sales at the library. I have even done the Twin Cities Book Festival and BookCon in New York. And so I've just had a great time learning how to do these events, how to find my way into them, and how to do them well. So I'm really excited to share with you my tips in this video. The first thing I want to talk about is actually how to set up the book signing or a bookish event, because I think a lot of people are actually mystified on how to do this. I know I was. Setting up a book event actually just really boils down to two things. Number one, doing your research, and number two, asking. The research is extremely important, because if you apply to an event or a location or whatever that would not accept your book, they're just going to be frustrated that you didn't look up the rules in advance and figure it out in the first place. So for example, a lot of authors want to get into Barnes & Noble, and so they'll ask me like, how do I do it? What do I do? But they haven't done the research, because if they did, I know that they would have found this webpage that Barnes & Noble has on their website about how to be considered for an author event. There are also people who ask me, how do I sell my book at Barnes & Noble? And again, Barnes & Noble has a whole page on how to sell your book at Barnes & Noble. And so there's a list of qualifications. If you do your research, you can find out the things that you need to do to make sure your book is qualified and able to be considered for an event like Barnes & Noble. For example, a lot of people aren't aware that Barnes & Noble does require books to be returnable. And so that is a feature that KDP, which is Amazon's print-on-demand company, does not currently have. And so if you want to do a Barnes & Noble book signing and have them actually buy the books, which they prefer to do, and they might require, I don't know for a fact anymore, but they might require that they buy the books themselves, and therefore the books have to be returnable. Other places might require that your books are put on consignment, which means that they don't buy them, but you like loan the books to the store, and if the book sells them, then they pay you, and it's like a certain time frame. So every location is different. If you go to some place like BookCon or the festival like the one I did today, then you often have to apply to be part of it, and there's a whole system and an application thing that you have to go through. So you won't know these things until you do your research. Penny just left. So again, I feel like I can't say this enough. It's really, really important that you do your research, because booksellers will really, really appreciate this. Event people in general will just really, really find you respectful and wonderful and want to work with you more if you've done your research. And then the second thing, like I mentioned, is you just have to ask. My favorite way to ask, and actually the way I definitely recommend if you're at all able to, is to go to the location where you want to do the event or the book signing and ask them in person. It is so, so, so helpful to have that in-person, face-to-face contact, because once they get to know you and actually like talk to you face to face, it's going to get your foot in the door a lot more than like an email would. If you're not able to go to the store, then my second biggest tip is definitely to call them, because again, the more personal it can be, the more likely they are to actually consider you. So if you're talking to somebody directly in real time and you're like, hey, I would love to do a book signing or an event at your store, is that something you would ever consider doing for a local author? And what are the ways that I could possibly get that started? It can be a little more awkward, as you can tell, when you're talking in person, so you can kind of give yourself some talking points, which we'll cover in a second. But whenever you're talking to somebody in person or over the phone, it's going to come across a lot more like personable and friendly, and just definitely more desirable, because they're going to get to see who you are and be more excited about somebody that they actually like know a little bit. I don't know how else to say it, but I hope that makes sense. And then the third way that I would recommend, if you can't do that, and if you've called and you haven't been able to reach anybody, is to do email. And I would suggest email more as a last resort, but definitely above like social media or anything else, because email is way more professional, and you definitely want to come across like a business person because you are talking to a business. So you want to be as professional as possible. If you do have to write an email though, I definitely recommend still calling the store and getting the name of the correct person that you should be addressing the email to, because you want it to be personal and you want it to go, you don't want it to be like, to whomever it may concern, or hello all, or any crap like that. Do not do that. The more personal and professional that you can be, the more likely they are to say yes. I'm going to give you an example of what I would say if I were writing the email or if I were talking to them in person, and some of the things that you're going to want to have on hand and ready to go or add to the email, again, depending on which way you go. I'm going to read an example of what I might write to a bookstore if I were writing an email, and generally you would say this same kind of information, but just in a more casual, like conversational way. All right, so the first thing is hi and their name. You want to make sure that you personalize it to the specific person that you're writing to. I personally think when people just write me kind of a spammy message, I will almost instantly delete it. But if they write, hi Bethany, I will take the time to read what they have to say because they took the time to personalize the message to me. So just saying, I think that's really important, especially in this day and age when you can get a lot of spam, to make it personal. The second thing I would do is lead with what you're asking them. So I would make it brief and to the point, but I would also make sure to include how it benefits them, because why do they care? You have to make them understand why they should care. So for example, I'm writing to see if you would be open to hosting a book signing by a local author. I think it would really benefit your store, and I'd be very excited to market the event and draw a crowd to your store. So you can see that I slipped in there that I am willing to do the marketing, which they will really appreciate because bookstores don't usually do a lot of marketing for signings. So if they know that you're promising to bring people in to this event, they're going to be a lot more interested right off the bat. The next thing you want to do is explain to them what your book is and what it's about. So you keep it, again, brief and to the point. So I would say my novel is a young adult fantasy retelling of Aladdin from Jasmine's perspective. And I would leave it at that. I don't want to ever like overwhelm them with information, although you could potentially say something like, I will copy and paste the synopsis of the story below this email if you're interested, but they can always look it up. So I say keep it short. Don't overwhelm them. The next step is to have your ISBN number ready. So if you're talking to them in person or on the phone, make sure you have it handy and ready to tell them, because that is how booksellers look up books. But if you're writing an email, I just say the ISBN number is blank, whatever it is, if you'd like to know more details. And then again, they can click on it to look up the book in their system, see the cover, see what it's about, see all the information that they need to know. And then I like to sign with something professional, like, I look forward to hearing from you and I hope we can partner on this event idea in the future. Sincerely, Bethany. So that's just an example of the kind of email that I would write. You can make it personal to you, but I just think it's important to, number one, not waste their time. So keep your email short and to the point. Number two, I think it's really important to let them know what's in it for them. Don't write an email that's all about you. I'm awesome. You should definitely take me on. I write amazing books. Don't do that. They're just gonna be like, that's nice, but why should we care? So let them know why they should care, and let them know that you're excited about the idea of bringing a bunch of people to their store and telling everyone about it. And I think that's going to definitely make them a lot more interested. Most of the time, if you do your research and if you ask them in a very polite, professional way, a bookseller or a book event is going to say yes. And so, yay, awesome. We're going to talk in a second about what you do next. But there are some reasons that a bookseller might say no. And mainly those are if they're a business. So if the book doesn't look like it would sell, if it doesn't have like a specific place on the bookshelf. I got really lucky that Barnes & Noble was willing to do a signing with me, but technically Evelyn's number is both dystopian and a little bit Christian. And so it's like kind of this genre blend that doesn't actually have a physical place on the shelf. And so many places might say no to that. So you have to be really aware. Same thing with having a good cover, a good blurb. Does this book look like it's going to sell and actually attract readers? That's really important to a bookseller because that's their entire job. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. I do have a whole book about how your book sells itself right there. You can't see it, it's above and saw the shelf above. But I will put a little picture of it. You can go check out how your book sells itself. I talk about the 10 different ways that you can make sure your book is basically selling itself. And so you get the idea. If you have any trouble and you feel like people might be saying no to you for any particular reason, you can check that book out and get some ideas. But now we're gonna move on to the second part of this video, which is what do you do once you have a signing? Like, what do you even expect? I remember when I first had, I think my very first signing was at Barnes & Noble. I did tons of research. I was Googling things. I couldn't find hardly any information out there. And so I want to be that resource for you guys today and hopefully help you. The first and biggest thing that I want to bring up today is something that I remember reading in multiple places online that really helped me go into a book signing with the right mindset, because otherwise I think I would have thought that I was a failure. And that is that most of the time authors only sell between 10 to 20 books total. Like total. Like if you sell 10 books, you did a good job. If you sell 20 books, you did incredible. And so that's excluding like bigger events like BookCon, where I think I sold more like 80-ish, plus or minus a few giveaways that I did. But most of the time I have found that my range is between 10 to 20. And so again, that's also excluding, like, I would say maybe your debut, your very first book signing ever might do a little bit better, but I just want to help you set your expectations, because I think if I hadn't known that, I would have assumed book signings you just sell like 100 books. I've been really disappointed. It's pretty rare, even for some bigger authors. Most of the time 10 to 20 is the range, unless the book signing had tons of publicity, and then it could sell more. But what I read online and what I've definitely found to be true is that events and book signings tend to be way more about networking and making connections that will benefit you down the road and help you get future signings and events, which have totally happened to me. I have gotten, this weekend I did the Twin Cities Book Festival. Last weekend I did a library book signing. Both times I got tons of business cards. I met so many cool people. And if I hadn't even done the library signing, I wouldn't have known the Twin Cities Book Festival even existed, because they actually had a spot open up and they asked me if I would want to fill it. So as you can see, I am a living example of how it's not just about selling books, it's also about networking. So you need to be aware of that and have that mindset going in. So that leads to my second tip, which is bring business cards, because it's really hard to make connections if you don't have a business card to give away. And I just ran out of business cards today, so I can vouch for that it's really frustrating to run into somebody cool and be like, hey, I don't have anything to give you to contact me, but let's connect. You know, it makes it tricky. So the second step I would say is get business cards and bring them with you. At least my third tip, and the one that I completely forgot to do today, and I always regret when I forget to do this, is to bring an email sign up. And all you have to do, honestly, is you could bring a piece of paper and a pen, and you could just write name and email, or you could make something fancier on your computer. But it really doesn't have to be that fancy. Again, it could just be name and email with a column for each. And if you do this, it's going to help you a ton, because there's so many people who they'll look at your book and they'll consider it, but maybe they didn't bring enough money, maybe they already spent their whole budget for the day on other books, or maybe they want to see what's out there, but you're leaving when they come back or something like that. So it can be extremely helpful to have an email list, because a lot of people are way more willing to just give you their email and just like see what you send them. And so if you start sending out emails where they get to know you and they get to know more about your books, and they get free things from you, like your opt-ins, eventually the rule of 7 kicks in, which is to say that in marketing, they say about 7 times someone needs to hear about a product before they decide to buy it. So your first time that you told them about the product was at the event, but then they sign up for your newsletter and they hear about it 6 more times, or however many they really need, and they end up buying your book in the future. So you can see how valuable this is, and I'm kicking myself that I forgot to do that today. My fourth tip, if you want to, is I have seen writers bring fun table decor and random beautiful things that make the booth or the table or wherever you are a little bit more interesting. So when Mandy and I did BookCon, we did this. We had this super fun like Polaroid, and Mandy actually was the one who ended up putting it together once we brainstormed it. I think when you do stuff like that, it can make your table just a little bit more personal and a little bit more interesting and eye-catching. And so it could definitely be the reason that it draws somebody up to your table. Like I saw an author who had a dragon in a cage, and I thought that was so cool. So I definitely think if you have fun table decor ideas, you can make it as unique as you want. Just remember you have to carry it, which leads to my next tip, and that is to use a rolling suitcase. Whether you have a lot of books or you're not even bringing that many, either way, I found that a rolling suitcase can be a lifesaver because it made today so much easier, and I just really appreciated having that. The next one is to bring Sharpies of some kind or a pen so that you can sign the books. And then my last tip, of course, is remember the payments. So I know that a lot of people will do cash, and it's good to bring change for that. So you can bring a handful of ones and a few fives, maybe a 10, call it good. But a lot of people also want to buy with their credit card, and I found that if I don't have that option, I kind of lose sales. If you're doing a Barnes & Noble book signing where they have bought the books, then they will take the payment. You won't have anything to do with that, so don't worry about it. But if you are taking the payment yourself, like I did at BookCon and the festival and the library, for example, you can use something in the US called the Square Reader, I believe. That's what I chose to use because a lot of people recommended it to me and it was just the easiest option. But I definitely recommend that you do your research. I am not going to give you advice on what else there is out there because I don't know. Figure out what's best for you. And if you're going to take credit card payments, just make sure that it's safe. Oh, I will add a bonus tip, which is to also make sure that you charge your phone. And if you're able to, bring some kind of charger, especially awesome if you have a charger that doesn't need to be plugged in, and it's like the case itself is a charger. Bring that. Make sure your phone is at 100% because you're going to need it for the Square app. If you're taking credit card payments that way, you're also going to probably want it to take pictures. And another bonus tip, I guess, then would be to take a lot of pictures because you're going to be very happy that you did. It's a fun memory to look back on, and you can also share it on social media and your author newsletter. So I would definitely encourage you guys to give this a shot. Don't be afraid to just dive in, do your research, and ask, because the worst thing that can happen is they can say no, and then you move on to the next person and you try somewhere else. And I really think that this is a fun thing to do. So again, I'll caution you not to buy too many books because I have definitely bought too much stock in the past. But if you do happen to have too many, then I guess you just have to start doing another event, right? All right, give this video a thumbs up if it helped you. Make sure you subscribe below. There's a bell somewhere down there that will alert you next time I have a video. I will see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.